2024 Special Troy City Council meeting. I'll call it to order and ask for the roll call from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Brooks.
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga.
Here.
Councilmember Chanda.
Here.
Councilmember Gunn.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton. Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick.
Here.
We do have quorum present. Councilmember Hamilton will be joining us via Zoom today for discussion purposes. We aren't taking any votes in here today, but if we were, he wouldn't be allowed to vote. But technically, it's an excused absence. I will, or in my opinion, I'll move resolved that Troy City Council hereby excuses the absence of Councilmember David Hamilton at the special City Council meeting of June 24th, 2024 due to health reasons.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga, that we approve and excuse the absence of Councilmember Hamilton from the in-person meeting for the reasons stated and printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? Here's the voting. Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga.
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda.
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick.
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilmember Hamilton, as a reminder, if I don't call on you and you have something to say, just unmute yourself and let us know. All right. First up on the agenda is public comment. There are several people here. I'm not sure who plans to speak for public comment. Is there any planned public comment? Start. All right. So we move on to business stated in the special meeting notice. We have one item this evening. D1 is a Troy Public Library strategic plan. I'm going to turn it over to Acting City Manager Bruner to get things started.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last regular council meeting, you received a presentation on the library's strategic plan and scheduled this meeting to allow City Council to ask questions and find out what's on your mind and what additional information you need to move forward with the, or how to proceed with the library. So we don't have a presentation tonight. We're looking to utilize as much time as we can for questions. We'll provide answers if we can. If we don't have the answers with us tonight, then we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Okay. So I think the most efficient way to do this is to, we all have the first 19 pages of the strategic plan. We don't have the additional, 95 pages of appendices for a number of reasons, but since we can't access things electronically during these meetings, I thought it was wise to have these in front of us, and I appreciate city management for doing that. So instead of forcing a discussion around the table, I think we should start with anybody who wants to start with either a question or a comment, and we'll see if anyone's brave enough to do that. Councilmember Gunn, see, I knew we'd get one. Yeah.
Well, the biggest question is always going to be, I think, is funding and what the strategy is on funding.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that this is an opportunity to talk about that a little bit in some general terms maybe, and then we can certainly request additional information from the manager's office as to how that may look or some more specific details. Because without a presentation, it doesn't sound like they're prepared tonight to discuss in-depth funding opportunities, but I bet there's some general things that could be discussed. Is that fair?
Yeah, in general, investing in a new library or other capital project is going to require additional millage. We don't currently, the current capital millage couldn't support building a new library without significantly, cutting back on roads and a lot of other essential things. The operating millage primarily supports public safety, so within the city's and the current library millage is, got us open 7 days a week and anticipated some improvements, but certainly not a total rebuild. So when we get to the point in the process, the city council says, yes, we want to build a new building or renovate the existing building, whatever the solution is, it's going to require additional funding that would need to be approved by the voters.
Well, my follow-up, I guess, would be what I would like to see, what they're going to bring before they bring the millage up, several presentations in terms of grants, in terms of fundraising, reaching out to different individuals. I was partially involved a little bit in this Belleville building that was built, and it wasn't immediately, so I'd like to see several options before we start talking about taxes.
Councilmember Turnbull Craig.
Can I follow that? So actually, I have a question related to that, which it speaks to the, what was proposed, this idea of developing, outlining some sort of capital campaign with private funding. I just wonder if perhaps our library director, Emily Dumas, if you could speak a little bit to kind of how you feel about that. It's something that if I look at Troy, and I've theorized a little bit about how the social contract and how things work in Troy, there is this great spirit of volunteerism and people give to different needs. I haven't seen though at the level of maybe an example, and this is also city management could speak to this as well. Maybe the dog park is an example. What is an example, and do you feel confident that that's something that we could do very well in Troy? And do we have examples from city management of a project where we have sourced a lot of private funds, including from the community? Because I haven't seen that in the way that I have actually in other communities. So that's why I'm wondering, is that kind of a realistic bullet here?
I think that a portion of it, we could do a fundraising campaign and raise. I think you could do segments of a new library. You could maybe, let's say, get enough to build a storytime room, which is something we see at area libraries, named after a private donor. I don't think you would be able to raise enough for an entire building.
I have a question for city management on the financial aspect of a little bit. I mean, sometimes we're very stable with our budgeting and very stable with a lot of things, but the economy as a whole feels sometimes volatile. Sometimes it feels great, sometimes it feels awful. And I'm wondering what it would take or what you would need from us to, well, I think I need to take a step back. It's foolish to talk about how we come up with money until we even know what kind of money we would need. So for me, the first step is, what does a new library cost realistically with the needs and wants of this community based on all the communication work that's already been done and some additional, of course. I know that there was a study done back, previous library director a long time ago, and that there was a number given there, but I think things have changed a lot. And so I don't know, obviously how you pay for anything is gonna be a big thing, but we don't even know what we're trying to pay for yet. So I think that's a more of a threshold issue for me to start out.
We can look at that further by doing some facility assessments, but right now the estimate that we've kind of been working on, which is just a really rough estimate, would be upward of $40 million to go ahead and get a new library over there. Now again, that's always changing, and that is just a rough estimate, but we've been using that as kind of a starting point for a conversation here around that.
May I add too, that by the end of our millage too, we'll have about $12 million. If we started planning now, we would accumulate about $12 million that could go into a new build.
That's at the end of this year, or?
No, it'd be at the end of our millage, which
Or
would
at the end of the
be,
millage.
yeah, 2030.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yeah, so basically a follow-up on that. I mean, 40 million is a ballpark number for building a new library. Has that also been considered? Have we considered renovating this building as well as expanding the building, or that?
Yes, we've looked a lot in the past about renovating or expanding the building, and again, that's something that we could look at in even further detail as we move down this path. But generally, the consensus is when that's been studied in the past, that the current state of the building, the way it was constructed over the years, given the fact that it was renovated and remodeled and added onto, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, that there isn't a lot of space to go ahead and expand to really fit the needs, and that the actual infrastructure would not support a second floor, nor are we sure that a second floor would even solve the actual building and infrastructure needs. So in the past, when it's been looked at to do, there are definitely small improvements that we could make to the library, but the general consensus is that we would still be dealing with a lot of the same issues that we're having as far as the building is concerned, and that a new building would probably be the best way to address those.
Before I go to you, Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick, I want to follow up on what Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig had asked. I know the Troy Community Foundation happens to be here. You've got all the money ready for us, I guess, is my first question. But I guess my question for you is, and Emily might also know, or somebody from the library staff, but there's a TPL endowment fund. Do you know offhand how much you've raised from the community for that fund?
I mean, it's under 200,
Right.
you know, so it's.
So, I mean, to answer your question a little bit, like that's, I think that's our most successful
Right.
kind of fundraising thing for a community asset. And, right, so that's my
I mean,
question.
can I make a follow-up question on that? I mean, I know some other communities have raised money from private donors or fundraising. I mean, is it possible to look at some of the similar cities who were successful in generating significant amount of cash and how they did it?
Yes, we can do that. I think the first question you have to answer though is, what kind of library do you want?
Yeah. I understand that we won't be able to raise $40 million, it's impossible unless some star-studded event takes place somewhere. But we could raise, certain amount, let's say a couple of million, 3 million, whatever it is. Right?
Ask Rob what's the most money he's ever seen raised for construction of a new library.
I would say in this kind of size community, a couple million. I mean, my business partners in Sun Prairie, they're a little bit smaller than you. They're doing basically doubling the building. It's a $30 to $40 million project, and I think the foundation is raising they're trying to raise about $2 to $2.5 million.
Well, I got another option is, what about bonds?
Right.
Well,
Or do you want to tag up on that?
I think, to answer the question, what kind of library do we want? I guess I would want to echo the comments the mayor made in the State of the City. We have A+ services in an A+ education-oriented community, in an A+++ school district. I want an A+ library. I don't pretend to know exactly what that means, but when I walk through the library and I hear the infrastructure and I hear mold remediation, when I've personally watched us deal with flooding repeatedly, elevators that don't work, and it's like it's a money pit, common sense says to me, we're looking at a new build. And we can try to placate people who are, oh, can't you figure out a way to do it? I feel like it's Groundhog Day. And we've been talking about this over and over and over again. If somebody's watching and they're new to this, this is not a new discussion. This is something we keep tabling, and we are wasting our taxpayer dollars because we do it. That said, funding is a challenge, and I'm not eager to have my taxes raised. I want it done very, very, very smartly when we look at the city's assets. And I think the library is one capital need that's swirling in our heads. The Aquatic Center, 4 years ago, it came up with that we need to be looking at that. We have capital assets here on the Civic Center that are aging. They can seem new because it seems like just yesterday we built the community center, or just yesterday that we put the aquatic center in. They're not new, and they're going to need capital funding. And so when I think of funding, I'm worried about a library, and I'm all about it. And I'm worried about these other assets. When we talk in terms of millage, a millage accrues over years. And we're kind of waiting for that money. Bonds, which have brought us many of the assets that we all love and enjoy in the city, I think bring that money, that's our more, and Rob, the CFO, is nodding at me. Maybe could you talk about the difference between a millage and a bond for a moment, and how that helps, how managing that works, what the challenge is, maybe the pros and cons, or maybe that's information we need. I think Rob can do that off the top of his head for
Sure,
us.
yeah. Bobby, mind if
Rob, go ahead and answer that
Sure, so.
question, but
so we-
before he does, let me make it clear that bonds require millage to repay. And so they both require more tax dollars, just in
Right.
different ways. So when
Right.
it's a debt millage versus a different kind of millage. But there's no magic way you get $50 million without increasing taxes.
But some of the operating for the library that comes from the library millage, if it's not being used for renovations, could be used to pay toward a bond payment, so.
No, absolutely, I
so
just
it's
don't
not
want
a-
anybody to mistakenly think that there are different funding mechanisms, but when I use the term funding, it's all inclusive. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, yeah, you're fine. So that's to your point, Ellen, we've spent a lot of money on bonds in the past, and that's how the aquatic center, the recreation center, the library originally, this building was built through having bonds. Well, what does that mean is you get the money up front, and then you have a millage to pay down the debt service. So that would include just like your mortgage at your house, right? You get the money up front, say it's 40 million, if that's the example we're using today, you'd have a bond for 40 million, and then over, pick a period of time, usually 20 years, you would pay that off each year, and without getting too specific, a $50 million bond would be under $500,000. So just to give you guys an idea. Does that help?
And one of the important differences is that with a debt millage, the rate changes in order to repay what the debt is. So, like, I think, Mary, you were talking about, the economy goes up and down. With a bond millage, the economy goes down, the tax rate goes up. With an operating millage, if the tax rate goes down, the millage rate stays the same and the revenue goes down with it. So there's pluses and minuses both ways, but once you've issued that debt, you've got to repay that debt. So unlike our other, most of the other millages that we're all familiar with, they go down every year. Headley rolls them back every year. With a debt millage, that doesn't happen. That gets readjusted every year to pay the debt.
And if interest rates go down, the payment's cheaper, right? Like it was with the DDA bonds that you worked so hard to refinance.
Absolutely, and so like,
Sure. Hold on, David, 1 second.
I've got numbers at, like right now, I got them from our bond counsel and financial consultant for a bond in 20 years of approximately 4.5%. That was the midpoint of he gave me 3 different numbers, the 4.5 was right in the middle. And yes, if over 4 years from now, if interest rates go down, we'll be refinancing those bonds and make it a lower payment for sure.
Councilmember Hamilton, I think, wanted to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm out sick today, so sorry everyone, but I'll try to comment how I can. When I was elected to City Council back in November of 2017, our city's millage rate was 10.35. Currently, it's 9.86. So it's already reduced by 0.46 over the last, how long am I counting now, 6 years. So I think without even getting us to where we were just back in 2017, we would have enough for a new library. It would just be more than where we are now. To me, we need a new library. I've been to other libraries and trying to take my daughter to other libraries. Troy should have best of the best. When I went to Gene Stein Park a couple weeks ago and we cut the ribbon for that, it's such a beautiful, modern facility, and we need that for our library too. There's no doubt in my mind. And in the end, it's up to the voters. It's our job on council to investigate what we want, investigate what the people want, and then we'll present them a plan, and it'll get on the ballot, and if they want the new library, they'll be able to say yes. If they don't, they can say no. We cannot authorize increased millage rates without them. So in the end, it's up to the people, and it's up to us to provide them with something that they want. and I think they want this.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Councilmember Chamberlain Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of builds off of this. So it sounds like the next step we will need to do as a council is find consensus over doing some facilities assessment, that's probably what's next. So I might be getting ahead of myself. As I'm thinking about, and you brought this up, Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick, a vision of what might that A+, not that we're the experts to know,
Right.
but one thing I want to put out there, and I want to preface this came from a resident, someone who's in the room tonight, don't want to put them on the spot, but we had a great conversation about a vision of a future library. And they brought up, could there be this opportunity to consolidate space? Is there an opportunity not to just rebuild where it is now, but maybe a way to connect that to City Hall or connect that to the community center? And there could be space in those buildings that could be used. And then maybe it's an opportunity to also tackle some of those other bigger needs, somehow to, I mean, for better or worse, but tackle not just a library, but maybe there's some civic center developments we're doing together. Again, I'm not an expert to know, is that possible to consolidate, to do something with City Hall and the library at the same time? Again, maybe not all of it, but just something. And again, that's probably more at the facilities assessment stage. But I just want to put that out there to my colleagues, I really appreciate my colleague who's in the room, a community member who brought that up, and really, I'd like to explore that in the conversation.
If I may, I'm with you on that completely. I'm not, the library's an obvious need, but I think if we're gonna go out for a bond or look at something, there's gotta be more to it than just the library. And I see nodding heads on council, which is a good sign. But I think that we do know there's a lot of other, library's been a longstanding need, obviously, and it's very important. But I think it would be a mistake for us to just do a library if we're looking at doing something a little bit more comprehensive in other aspects. And so I've spent the past few years in my mind drawing all kinds of things. Like, I have all kinds of thoughts on what should be looked at. I don't know from a management standpoint or administration standpoint what, well, first of all, I know bond language to get approved. I mean, the school district passed their big bond and they said what they were gonna do, and I mean, that's what they're gonna do, right? So you can mix projects, right? I mean, that's an easy part. I guess my question as a follow-up to that is the specificity required in any bond language, or, I mean, how specific do we have to be? Obviously, there's a difference between what gets put on the ballot and what we communicate to the community is what we're gonna do with the money, but where is that, like, what is the necessary, I'll look at Lori first, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be able to communicate what it is that you're going to be spending the money on, but as far as the specifics, I just look back to the last one we did, the 99, bonds that were done in it. One of them was for the acquisition of parkland. Didn't say where you're going to be acquiring the parkland, it just said it was going to be used for the acquisition of additional parkland. So it has to be, certainly the library would be a part of it if the council chooses to go forward with that. But you could put other improvements in there and, again, as long as it's providing to the voters some clarity, and as long as that's all that it's used for is what's in the specific language, then that's permissible.
Is it enough just to say capital projects for civic buildings?
You should
You should
be a little more specific
No,
than
I mean,
that. I would
I'm just
recommend more
asking.
specificity.
Of course you would. All right. No, but I'm just curious, I mean,
One of the things we can do is we can provide city council with the language from 99, I think it was proposals A, B, and C, and also from other communities more recently, so you can just get an idea of what has been on ballots recently. And it may or may not reflect what the city council is ultimately interested in doing, but I think at a minimum it is helpful to see what voters have approved in other communities as a good starting point for getting your thoughts going.
I think I would also make clear before, I didn't say this a minute ago, to the library folks, this is a way to help the library get what it needs, not to detract from it. I don't want anyone to think, I think that there's a misperception that it feels like maybe we're pushing the library to the side again, and that's not my intent by any means. But I think there's a lot of competing needs, and I think that if we're gonna ask our community to invest in something like this, we better have something for as many of them as possible. And if that makes any sense, and I hear a lot, and I can tell you all the things I think wrong with some of the things on the buildings of the Civic Center, and I just would like to, and fire trucks, for example, all the important capital assets we need to have our community continue in a good way. So that's where my mind was. I just wanted to get that off.
And just to say in this comment, and I hope you don't mind if I call you out, Mahendra Kengri, so that was the conversation we had. And to be clear, in his and I hope you don't mind, but I just want to give credit where credit is due. And I think part of that conversation was even using parking space. Instead of, maybe we don't need all that parking space. The library could be, there's a lot of things we could shift around. It's just easy to look at what we have, but instead, really think outside the box, so.
Totally. So I don't know what the process is. I mean, and again, there's a few thresholds. Do we want to continue further with this conversation, and do we want to know what it looks like to have a new library? But then I think there is consensus that we want to know what that would look like and cost for sure. But I do think we need to, and I saw the nodding heads earlier, what else do we really need to have done in the immediate future? And if we're going to get an infusion of cash by asking our residents to help out with a bond, what needs to be those priorities? Again, I have my ideas, I'm sure you have your ideas, we all know what we think we know, but what is best from a city standpoint, administration standpoint, or how can you provide that to us, or how do you propose doing that?
At a future meeting, very much like this one. We talked
3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, no, we talked during the budget presentation about this being year of capital and about the library being kind of the kickoff to that conversation. So I anticipate that we're going to talk about fire trucks and some of the other specific things that have been brought up at earlier meetings and then tonight. In the meantime, I think perhaps what would be helpful for City Council is to hear from Rethinking Libraries a little bit about process and what starting with where we're at now, where Troy is at now, what kind of activities would be helpful to do between now and groundbreaking on a new library, because there's a lot of stuff to do between today and that day.
Let's go with Councilmember Brooks.
I just have a question specifically about the library. In terms of just kind of rethinking the library and thinking future-wise, I do want us to also keep in mind like how libraries will be used maybe 20, 30, 40 years out, because obviously the way the libraries are going to be used in the future is different than maybe how we utilize it now. So obviously I assume that there's going to be very smart people in the process, but I do want to definitely be thinking about kind of how space is utilized and how it might be utilized decades from now, not just how we're using it at the present moment. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
A question that would be more financially related, but I just want to make sure everybody, especially for the library people, no, I very much would love to see a new library. I did see a transition that was unbelievable in Belleville, and I would love to see that happen in Troy. The only thing, the difference in Belleville is it overlooks a big lake, so we don't have that. But
On land, I think the DNR.
Baker Lake is coming.
But from a financial standpoint, would there be any difference between a bond or a millage that, like, in terms of affecting taxpayers? Would it be one more than the other, or the same, or?
It's one and the same. So if you're asking for, if you want to, borrow $50 million, you have to pay that back.
Sure.
It's just no different, again, like your mortgage. There's an interest rate involved in it, it's a time duration. That's what's going to be the ultimate value of what the bond is. And the other part is, Kelly can tell you this, it's what is our taxable value each year. So those are
So there's no difference to the taxpayer?
Well, there is a potential difference because, like I said, the bond millage can go up if the tax base goes down.
Right.
But
we have a repeat of 08, right, Bob?
But if the tax base continues to increase?
Correct.
then that millage would more or less be steady. But a capital millage, like the one we have already, would be subject to Headley rollbacks.
Okay.
And so if the, if we had a millage and we were counting on it to, generate X amount of dollars, and the, our revenue projections were wrong about what tax-based growth were gonna be, then we could end up collecting less than that, which means taxpayers would pay less. So there is a potential difference to the effect on the taxpayer, but we'll never know which one, or we won't,
Sure.
If we could, any of us could predict the future, we wouldn't be here tonight having this discussion.
But I think
But also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If we try to do a millage, we wouldn't be able to do it immediately. We'd have to wait for the money to build up to be able to pay for a library, right? I mean, versus a bond, the money would be up front, so we'd be able to work on it kind of right away, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, I mean, we can-
Or you could issue bonds against that future revenue, but it's a different kind of bond. So there's a lot of different ways to achieve the same thing, and I'm not suggesting one is better than the other, they're just different.
So is it better to, I guess I would like to see, personally, I'd like to see two tracks of, we don't know how much money we're interested in borrowing yet, but I wouldn't mind learning about that process in some general terms along the way while we're also investigating what we might want to be building and how much it would cost, just because I don't want to take X amount of time to figure out what a new library costs, how many fire trucks we need, X, Y, Z, and then start the next process of, well, this is what financing would look like. Can we learn both at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's fair.
To Teresa's point, though, what she said, it was earlier, what Emily Dumas had said is that, okay, that's an operating millage that we've had before, right? And so it's paying for, 7 days a week service, amount of hours, right? And what was left in there was meant to be some maintenance of the building. So to say, oh, let's do a major capital project, it's gonna take what's the length of our millage, 10 years? It's gonna, each year you're gonna save, let's just say $500,000. So by the end of 10 years, you're gonna have, you said $12 million, right? So we'd have $12 million at year 10. The beauty of a bond is that you get that money up front, you can start breaking ground and starting to build things and buy things to go in the building, all within maybe 2 years or something to that effect.
And again, we're able to use some of that money we're collecting on that library village now to pay towards those bond payments, right?
100%, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what, so yeah, but that was one of my.
Wait.
No
I just want to point out, the difference to the taxpayer is they don't feel like it's a sluggish use of their taxes. That's the difference to the taxpayer. When you're the taxpayer, we voted in a bond for the school district. We're seeing it happen. We are seeing immediate results of those dollars. The library, this community rallied behind a library operating millage, hoping for some of that to be capital improvements, and some of that, there has been some. But it's gotten caught in construction costs that came in down the pipeline. There are literally people asking the question, what happened to that millage? What's it doing? They don't see what it's doing, it's not tangible. So I think that is just on a practical level, out of your pocketbook, the money's the money. We're not getting free money because we did a bond.
Right.
And we're still gonna have to come together as a community. But I also think that with a bond, the private private folks that might come with 3, 4, let's say maybe $10 million, let's dream, they see a community that's skin in the game, we're all in, we wanna do this. If I'm a philanthropist and I'm wanting to invest, I can see that that money's there and I can match it there. That's just the real world of it. And I've watched this in other communities. We seem to always get tangled up in ourselves and we slow roll it and we go cheap. And we're hurting ourselves and costing taxpayers more. And I've paid more into stuff that wasn't what I thought I was going to be paying for. it's frustrating as a taxpayer. So That's the difference.
So you're saying there's gonna be a Hollerich wing?
I agree. I mean, you know, the city has spoken. I mean, we do need an improved library, and very likely it has to be a new library, right? And when you explain to the citizens what they're going to get for their tax increase, usually they support it, right? That's our job, is to explain exactly what they get, and are we doing the best job in terms of, let's say, for example, saving $10 million from the current millage, and then, okay, we need 50 million, but we need to borrow only 10 million because of this, and this, right? So if we can show people that this is exactly what you're getting, and most Troy residents that I spoke to are in favor of library. Myself is very much in favor of a new library. We need that for our city. But our job is to make sure they understand what exactly you're getting. And that's what I expect to see in the new plan. I mean, 40 million or 50 million is a ballpark number, obviously. We haven't put any thought process in exactly what we're going to get. And as Councilmember Kimberly Krenga mentioned, I mean, we could do some outside the box thinking in terms of, can we generate some revenue out of that? Can we combine with something else, right? So that's what I would like to see. But at the end of the day, it's up to Troy residents to decide if they want it or not. And I'm sure they will want it.
I just want to share, so Bill's up with this, absolutely. Wanted to remind us, and for our new folks as well, we did polling, I don't know if it's been 2 or 3 years ago, and the takeaway, when we asked our residents if they would be willing, if they knew what it was going towards, would they support further enhancements, and number 1 was around a debt millage. That was what they were most comfortable with, because the other thing to remember, you pay it off. At some point it ends. You've paid it off, it is gone. We just paid off, what was it, 2-3 years ago, all, the millage that went towards purchasing, the debt millage, the bonds to purchase the park space. Yeah, exactly. So it's paid off. Our residents, we already did polling a couple years ago, and again, we need to get back into the community, more on that. I think the thing that I do want to raise with this, going into it, and the reason why I've had questions before around doing a bond, a debt millage, is that, are we going to guess the right amount? And I know when I was in PTA meetings, I was asking that also with the Troy School District with the bonds, like knowing how much prices are going up. And sometimes the fear is, because we're still in that ARPA spending phase, I mean, although it may be several years before we actually get this going, so maybe things will stabilize, but I think that's just what I want to make sure is we bake in the contingency, which I think already staff do like 20% on everything that's capital. So to make sure we are asking the public for the right amount, and that so we can make good on what we're saying we're doing. That's what's really important to me.
Right.
Yeah, just to put it in, sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, David, you've been quiet, go ahead.
Sure, yeah, to put it in perspective, like if we're talking 0.3 mils, that would cost the average household in Troy $4 a month for 20 years for a brand spanking new library. $4 a month for the average residential household in Troy for 0.3, which may or may not be what we need. We need to do the research, but that's kind of where I think we're at right now.
We'll verify those numbers, David. Yes, Lizzie?
Yeah, I have some figures. So I'm Kelly Tim, the assessor. If we did a $500,000, it would generate approximately 3.5 million a year. It would cost the average taxpayer at 0.5, a $500,000, about $80 a year. The average taxable value is about $160,000.
So what is 3.5 million a year in addition to what the library has in excess? How much of a bond can that get? We're going about this probably wrong, but.
Oh, we are. So.
Yeah.
I think the takeaway to that is, to Bob's point, we can give you those numbers.
That's a better.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the point is that I think what you have to tell us is what size and where you want this thing, right? I mean, those are at least 2 major factors. I saw 80,000 square feet. I saw 90,000 square feet. We need that information, and then we need to take those to some experts to tell you what that's going to cost. 40's been bandied about. What I would just say, my own opinion and just a caution is, let's don't get caught up in, oh, we want to deal with the private sector too, and this and that. That's just going to slow things down. We're never going to get anywhere. I think we as the municipality have to build it. We have to, And then if we go and partner with private sector and they bring in something, then we get maybe some nicer furnishings. Or we get, to Emily's point, the youth room now is the best in the county. Whatever that looks like, but we have to build a building.
That's where we're going, I think.
Well, 2 points. One, there's gonna be, from what I have seen us spend on the library, we would be saving that money from all these major repairs. I mean, I'm seeing $500,000-600,000 a year, you know, so I don't know how that could be allocated. And Dave, to your point, when the bond dropped from 10.6 down to 9.8, is that because we paid off that $2 million one?
It's because we paid
Yeah,
off.
that was a big part, and had legal backs too, yeah.
Okay. So where would we put the 600,000? Would that be going towards?
Well, that's a question that we were hoping to get answered, because every year, I mean, every week, we come up with different
Right.
problems. For instance, like our doors, this is the most recent, our doors are broken now, and if we want to repair that, that'd be $600,000 alone to retrofit all of those 1970s and 80s doors. Now, is it something we could live with in a couple years if we knew we were getting a new building?
Well, 600,000
Absolutely.
covers part of the bond cost a little bit, but.
Yes.
But I'm sure that these contractors would be warranting the work for several years.
I'm gonna go way down, too far down into the future, but to answer your question, follow me on this one, okay? If you go to build a new building, right, and then you're finding $500,000 in savings every year because you're not doing maintenance, her fund balance in the library is gonna grow, right?
Right.
And then when it's time to renew that millage in 6-7 years, maybe we don't need one whole mill operating, maybe we only need 0.8, or whatever the case may be. So my point is all those savings will help later on down the road when you go to redo the next millage.
I'm staying with the
And
library.
another point, if you don't mind, is, let's say we bonded for 40 million for the library or for capital in general, and it ended up, because of that fund balance or because of savings and costs, we only need 30. Well, that other 10 million, either we could just never bond it and just the bond millage rate would just lower by 25%, or you could allocate that to other capital needs as well. So it's pretty flexible in that regard. You don't have to bond everything that the voters approve. You can do less. And you usually don't do that, but it could be done. For like the schools, for example, they got $500 million. If they ended up not needing all that, they could just not do it.
It's true.
You're not fixed to a millage rate. You're fixed to however much you end up bonding, and then the millage rate is whatever covers that. So if it's less, then you don't need to do it.
I do think we need some finance department specific. Thank you, David. I know you know a lot about this stuff, but I don't know where you are, but I'm pointing over there. But I want to be careful with too much talk about all that stuff, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea of where we're at in this process. And so I think we know we want some formalized information coming from our management team as to what the bond stuff could be. And then we can take the other stuff that we know and add it to it. But I don't want to go too far down that path in this meeting, because I think we're way out ahead of it.
I guess my question is, what's the next step? I mean, what do the city administration need from us? Because they're waiting for guidance on, I guess, how big the library is. Is that correct? The 40 million to me is the ballpark number, right? It is something, does not have any specificity in this. So are we supposed to give them a more concrete guidance? I need 19,000 square feet with this, or is that something?
Well, yeah, the question becomes, are we supposed to, 7 of us individually, pepper you with what we all think would be a good idea? Or is management gonna give us some options and then we discuss and come to consensus on what we think would be best? Because, I don't know, maybe 87,000 square feet's better than 92. You know, I mean, like, it's just not it's not quite the right thing for us. You know, we could spend hours throwing out those numbers. I think to Councilmember Brooks's point, there's a component there that we need to look at to, again, the concept of, does the library move and does it become part of the community center complex and there's more of a sharing of certain spaces in addition to that? I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be done. I think it would be, it may very well be that we do just an independent new library building all by itself, but it could make sense after a lot of study and figuring out that maybe it's a new library that's also with something else new, or, you know, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. And so I mean, certainly, we all can throw our ideas at management in an email, probably would be better if there's something we know we wanna talk about before we have another formalized meeting on it, but for me, I think it would help if you came back to us with a little more detail on some specifics of, these are potential options that may work in Troy for these reasons, and then seek some input from us, and we could say, oh, it's clear that option B is what I think we need, or it could be, we like our ideas better. You never know, right? I mean, that's part of the game, but I think it's wiser to have a starting point coming. I think you hear from us that we're interested in exploring further. I don't know that all 7 of us or even 4 of us could say we're on the same page as to exactly what that is. So I think a comfort level for me is having some stuff come to us, different options. Not just this is the library you need, but that would help me.
That other piece, I don't want to do this in a vacuum.
Right.
I know fire engines need to be ordered last year, like 3 of them, and they take years to come. That's one example. The idea of, reimagining, that's actually been going on for years, and we've kicked it around with the community, and the community actually liked the ideas of looking at the Civic Center in a broader way. I know staff walks around thinking about that and remembering the priorities and what residents liked. We don't deal in that day to day, and we might remember in piecemeal. So a staff discussion of folks that have been around a while, the pavilion, for example. Rob, pretend like we're a federal rep that's saying to you, I have federal funding I could bring, what are the projects that your city needs help with? I have ideas, but I know sometimes staff has even, we don't know the potential of maybe our library could have a pond in front of it. Or we don't know what we don't know about the infrastructure, the civic center, and what the needs are. The city hall, to me, I know staff doesn't care if they get a city hall. I know, I've talked to people, they're willing to stay on. But if we're talking about this, let's talk about this comprehensively. And maybe we remove it, but we should be talking about what makes sense on our civic center property. I think you put it really well. We're going into our next 70 years.
Oh.
We're at a juncture. Our debt mills are about to expire. David, what year do they expire?
DDA ones?
The final ones? Oh, see.
There's DDA. Oh, there's
Our
only
debt,
DDA
we're
ones.
almost, yeah.
2032, the 28 for the golf course.
We're
the golf course.
And we're a city with very little debt. We have a responsibility as residents to invest in it. And this is our chance. The library is a catalyst for talking about that, with the library being the priority. I think that's what we're all saying. But we don't want to miss opportunities. So what are those other things that keep our CFO, our city manager up at night, about things that you guys know we should be thinking of, that we don't know we should be thinking of? I guess that's what I'm saying, that would be related to this. Or even opportunities.
So talking about the overall infrastructural needs, not just the library.
In the civic center,
In the
yeah,
civic center.
yeah.
I mean,
Or even, like I said, fire engines, or, I know there could be
Or
stuff there.
capital needs, let's say.
Capital needs that our
Yeah.
residents would care about, too. They would want to know that we're trying to comprehend that, and let's have that discussion. This is our opportunity, so.
Is that something allowed in the bond language? I mean, can we have a more generic library as well as something else? That
Just like the schools did.
schools did, yeah. I mean, that is another idea. It'll drag down the library maybe because it might be a longer discussion, but that could be done. And I think to the taxpayers that maybe
I don't think
more-
it is a
I think
longer
it enhances
discussion.
the library's
Library,
position.
okay,
That's
yeah.
my opinion.
Because we've been having these discussions.
Yeah, I mean, we can say we can take care of a lot of the needs at the same time, and look, your bill is, what we heard is not something astronomical, like that. I would go with that, I mean, that's.
Yeah, they're on the shelf, some of those ideas.
Okay, I'll be honest, so I got a little confused because I'm nervous about spinning our wheels and trying to come up with what we think is good for the library, of course, also hearing you guys know best. I guess what I thought as the next step was, when I said facilities assessment, is get to the step where you hire a consultant, an expert who could come up with different models. I think I need that to react to. I don't want to spin my wheels trying to figure out, I would rather have an expert with, thinking outside the box, propose some options within the budget that we're thinking. It could, what is an A+ library in terms of square footage? I just don't want to get lost in that. I think the experts should do that, and my understanding is the strategic plan, you use your expertise, and you were honest in the last, your expertise is not facilities, so.
It is a bit, but our mandate for this project was strategic planning.
Okay, there you
So
go.
we didn't go in as deep as we would on a facility assessment, and we're not architects.
Right.
So if you're getting into actual concepts and feasibility and like what can fit on what and what's that gonna cost, you need an architect.
Right.
As a big part of that, so there's only so far we can take that.
So I would prefer to spend less time spinning our wheels and maybe move towards a direction we have consensus to hire something to kind of help us to react to. That would help me
Yeah,
personally.
I think that's, I didn't expect Bob and Meg to sit in the office and do it. I expected them to come back and say, we're hiring this consultant to do it. Exactly that.
Or, I was understanding you guys were talking about you wanted to all give input first before we hire, okay, you were, okay, so I was like, yes, we're not the experts.
I do think there's input though that we've given over the years. I mean, we talked about the community center or the civic center aquatic center for 4 years. I mean, there are things out there that we know. We've had Post-its and advanced meetings, or poster boards that show our needs that we've talked about. So we've done a lot of that input giving, but for specific to the library, yeah, I think we need professional.
And that is a kind of threshold next step question that you just sort of answered. Like, yeah, we're prepared to budget for that and continue to engage the professionals that we need to engage to continue down this path. So
Is there consensus for that?
Yeah, I mean, only thing I could think, it's from a customer point of view, right? What are the taxpayers getting, like the features? So that, I believe your consulting firm is in the best position to answer that. What are, A+ libraries offer? And that's something I agree that comes from you rather than coming from us to you, right? The only thing I can think of it, are we agreeing on a ballpark space? I mean, that might require, or is that something we ask them to come up with? 100,000 square feet.
Size, you mean?
Yeah, size. Yeah.
I think that's what the experts will tell us, what we need for this community.
For our
Good
cities.
for the long term.
For the long term. Okay, I think I agree with that. That's.
I would go with the experts in terms of the size, but I do think I recognize somebody here who worked on the pavilion that might, consider.
Good to know. No, I mean, there's a lot, and that's the other thing. I mean, I think that, to your point and to your point, staff already knows what our long-term capital needs are. We push off $1 million for tennis and pickleball on our budget every year because we don't have the funds. We know our community's demanding more pickleball potentially, right? I mean, like there are other projects that we are well aware of that could be integrated into a civic center reimagination that we don't need to necessarily, we don't slow down the library experts, but we know those projects should be at least part of the conversation at some point. I don't think any one of us would be like, I really think we need some horseshoe pits. Like that would be a new concept that isn't what we're talking about, right? I mean, we know, but I think when you talked about staff, you meant things that have been kept in the capital budget for years and push off that could play a role that we should add in, or at least have as part of the discussion. And if it looks like, well, we think our community may support funding X, Y, and Z because this is what makes sense, well, then we have to make those decisions, what would be included and what wouldn't. But no, you're right, let's not put Post-its on a wall of things we want to start throwing suddenly into a thing. That's chaos. And I hope you know what we've been talking about for a few years and what we think our community needs and wants. And
yeah, budgeting for $1 million fire trucks, which are now $2 million fire trucks, or $5 million park amenities, like we know how to do that. Right. Budgeting for $50 million facilities, whether it's a library or something else, that's a whole other level of effort and level of expertise. And so that's really the threshold question: is City Council ready to, continue down that path? And we can bring you. It's really process questions about who's going to do what and when, because it's gonna require more than just the people in this room.
I was ready about 3 years ago, so, like, that's, I mean, that's where I'm at,
Yeah.
so. Anything else? Do you feel like you have what you need from us?
Yeah, I felt like actually I had it before the meeting started, not that it's- but,
Right.
yeah.
Any, any other financial comments or library comments that, by staff that haven't been said that need to be? Okay. We have no other business on the state agenda, so we are adjourned.